Good morning. It's absolutely brilliant to be back here seeing people in 3D once again. We at the SRA, since lockdown, have run over 50 virtual and online events, but this is actually our first event in person in Wales for almost 2 years. So it's absolutely great to be back. There are, of course, advantages to online events. Firstly, I don't need to start by telling people either where the toilets are, which I understand they're out there and upstairs, and I don't need usually to have to tell people that we're not expecting a fire drill. But if there is, the fire alarm goes, someone will come and direct us and we'll go out that way. Another advantage of 2D events was during lockdown I could both hide my mullet and also trick people into thinking that I am actually not a small man. But it is a delight to be back, and one of the great things about 3D events is actually there's no substitute for speaking to people, having a two-way conversation, actually getting to network and talk to people. So I'm really looking forward to that today, and I'm really pleased we've got so many of you here. I'm also delighted to be in Cardiff. I've travelled up from Birmingham this morning, but I've spent a lot of time in Cardiff because my better-looking, more successful friend is from Cardiff, and I've spent many a night at Chapter, the Welsh Club, a posh night out in Penarth, having great evenings in Cardiff. So it's a delight to be back, although actually I started to hate Cardiff last night. And the reason for that is I'm staying at St David's Hotel just over there, and just at bedtime, I thought, I'll go out and have a look at the bay, you know, with the sparkly lights. And I went out, the door closed behind me and locked. And so I was suddenly stuck on a balcony at around midnight with no phone, semi-dressed, thinking this is a poor moment in my life. And I sort of started politely shouting, excuse me, I'm stuck on the balcony. That was having no effect. I was sort of not trying to wake hotel guests up, but also trying to wake them up. So it was a bit of a weird dynamic, but that didn't really work. So half an hour later, I took an innovative approach to trying to get out of this situation and started putting my shoulder into the door. And in one of the few manly moments in my life, I managed to crash through the door. The child lock, which somehow had gone back on, broke, and I'm delighted to say I didn't spend the night getting hypothermia sleeping on the balcony, and I am actually here in person. But to be honest, I was a bit bored of that Cardiff Bay view after half an hour there. But it's also great to be in Cardiff as well, because actually Cardiff and Wales has a proud history of innovation and also world-changing inventions. So thinking of my journey down here, I got on the train, and that will have used Philip Vaughan's ball bearings. Maybe in 5 years' time or so, we'll have trains that use fuel cells. William Grove invented that here. Now, if you wanted to track me, we could use Taffy Bowen's radar, or perhaps if I was being more reckless, we had Lion Laboratories over the way invent the breathalyzer. Just to be clear, I am a boring regulator, so I'm certainly never reckless, but the breathalyzer could be useful sometimes. And also, the fact I'm speaking to you now, I'm using a microphone which was perfected by David Hughes, who also sort of invented radio waves. And then this evening, it's my dad's birthday, and I realise I haven't bought him a present. It's his birthday this weekend, so hopefully he's not watching the broadcast of this, but I'll perhaps do some online shopping. And as you may know, Newtown in mid-Wales, that was where the first ever postal mail order service was invented. So there's loads of great inventions that have come out of Cardiff and Wales more broadly, but we're here today to discuss sort of innovation in the legal sector. And you might be wondering, well, why is the Solicitors Regulation Authority here to discuss that? Hopefully many of you know who we are, but if you do know who we are, you might likely know us for we're about the sort of setting the rules for solicitors, the qualifying standards, making sure that people can trust that when they use a solicitor, they'll be working to high ethical standards and they'll be competent. And that is a fundamental part of our job. But we also have an objective around increasing access to justice. And as most people in this room probably know, there is a problem with access to justice. Too many people, when they have a legal problem, either don't get any help at all, or they don't get help of an expert solicitor, and that can make a real difference. It can be the difference between, you know, losing your home, your job, your family, or maybe even your liberty. So I think we can all agree access to justice really matters, and we at the SRA have to think about, well, what can we do to play a role in trying to increase access to justice? We know it's a very complex problem. There's no easy solution. And what we do in that space is we think we can look at, are we supporting innovation? Are we supporting innovative ideas that might help more people get access to justice more easily? And this is actually a really important part of our work. In fact, I'm sure all of you have read our corporate strategy, or perhaps none of you have read our corporate strategy, but there's 3 priorities in there, and the second biggest priority on there is supporting technology and innovation that can help the public. So this stuff really matters to us. I suppose you may be wondering, well, practically, what are you doing about that? And perhaps if I just give you 3 quick examples of what we've done in the past to try and help innovation, and then I'm going to invite Liz up in a bit to talk about some of the things we're just doing in the future. So the first thing we've done is we've totally reformed our rules. What used to be the handbook, which was a 600-page rule book, we've changed that into a 130-page rule book, which is our standards and regulations. And why did we do that? There was lots of good stuff in our old handbook, but it was quite long, it was quite complex. There were quite a lot of finicky rules around what to do in certain situations with quite a lot of prescription. We've rolled that right back. We've got rid of sort of what we think is the unnecessary bureaucracy, focused on what matters, which is high professional standards, and we focus more on what are the principles of good ethical conduct. Because we think actually solicitors, you are far best placed to use your professional judgment in certain situations against those principles to make the right decision. So we've done that, we've given you more flexibility. Has that been a success? I think it's probably a bit early to, you know, declare victory. We are publishing an evaluation of what we think the impact of that, or an independent valuation at the end of this year, and there will be further reviews. But I think there are a couple of positive initial signs. So the first positive initial sign is, I suppose, the testing of those rules against the pandemic. Everyone here has had to adapt incredibly quickly to the pandemic happening. And actually that's been a real test of those new rules. Have they stood up in that situation? I think the general view is that not only have they stood up, they've actually helped. So instead of us having to publish loads of guidance, loads of waivers explaining whether you have to comply with this rule or whether you can do this thing now because the pandemic's hit, actually we had to do very little of that. And it gave you the flexibility to actually respond in a way that works both for your business and your clients. The second thing sort of interest in those rules is we've given more flexibility so people can now work as a freelance solicitor outside a traditional law firm structure. We have to see how that how that pans out, but the initial signs are quite positive. There's more than 370 freelance solicitors out there. I think there's half a dozen or so of those are based in Wales, and that gives people an option to work more flexibly, which again might work better for them, but also might work better for their clients. The second thing we've done in terms of innovation is we've set up an innovation team. It's called SRA Innovate within the SRA. And Warren and Ben, who are sitting over there, if they just want to raise their hands, they sit in that area. And what they're there to do is to literally support innovation. So if you have any questions about how the SRA can support you, if you've got innovative ideas, speak to them. They're very much there to help you on a journey, particularly if you're not sure, well, what are the regulatory implications of this? Can I do this? Come to them. They will offer you support and try and talk you through that. And effectively, a lot of people might have a stereotype of regulators that sort of will put up barriers and say no, but actually we'll try and work with you where we can, and that might be through piloting stuff, bringing together different regulators to work through rules. And then the third thing we've done in the last year or so was we got some funding from government to run what is called the Legal Access Challenge, which offered £500,000 to innovators who wanted to come up with tech solutions that were going to help the public. We had more than 300 people involved in that. We had over 100 entries, a number of those coming from businesses within Wales, and had some really interesting ideas come through. For instance, MenCap developed a chatbot to help those with learning disabilities, to help them self-serve through the initial stages of a sort of benefits process or what they might be entitled to. But that project wasn't only about sort of giving a stimulus to new ideas, it was also actually about us learning what can we do better as a regulator in terms of supporting innovation. And one conclusion we had from that was, although the SRA's rules aren't necessarily always blocking innovation, actually people find the regulatory environment pretty complex. So you've got financial services regulation, you've got data governance regulation, you've then got legal regulation, and it's been quite hard to get your head around what that means, for instance, if you're trying to use tech. So we're trying to work at what we can do to make that easier and that joining up easier. I just wanted to ask you all a question now, and that was linked to COVID. I wanted people to raise their hand if you and your business have changed the way you work on the back of coronavirus, but you think some of the changes you've made or one of the changes you made is going to stick in, hopefully, when we get there post-coronavirus world. So who's made changes that I think are going to stick? Yes, I think most people are putting their hand up. I'm going to ask you another question. Who's using or started using video conferencing to talk to clients? Yep, pretty much everyone again. That doesn't surprise me at all, because actually we did some research with Oxford University over the summer, which we published, speaking to hundreds of firms, including around 30 firms in Wales, and we asked those types of questions to firms, and what that research showed was 90% of firms think they've made changes that are going to stick, and a similar number have been using video conferencing. When it comes to, let's say, more sophisticated cutting-edge tech like artificial intelligence, around a third of firms said they were doing something in that space. But if you're interested in that report, it's a really interesting report. We've got Sarah here who worked on that report, who's going to be on the second panel. But we've also done webinars and stuff on YouTube, and you can find the report there. So that might be of interest for you to look at. So we've only got a couple of minutes more before we're going to get on to the far more interesting people, which are our panelists. But someone who is more interesting than me is Liz, and she's going to just say a little bit around introducing herself, but also a little bit around some work we're doing as well. So Liz, do you want to come up?
Thanks very much, Ben. And Ben has very clearly already said I've only got a couple of minutes. So, so I'm Liz Withers. I'm our new Head of Welsh Affairs for the SRA. I'm based here in Wales. I've been in post for about 5 months, and I'm really pleased to be able to see some familiar faces. Some of you I've already been speaking to virtually, and it's brilliant to be able to meet you all some of you face to face today, and I'm looking forward to meeting more of you over the coming months. So before I go into a couple of the projects that we're going to be working on moving forward, I just wanted to touch on the importance and the significance of today, in the sense that 55 years ago today at 9:13, 16 children and 28 adults lost their lives in Aberfan when a coal waste tip came crashing down on a school and one of our communities, and I just think it's important to remember that today. So on a slightly lighter note, it's also very strange to see you sitting in this space, because I'm used to sitting in this space running away from dinosaurs, because this is normally a virtual reality screen, and you've got dinosaurs coming out at you, so hopefully that doesn't happen today. I wanted to talk about a couple of projects that we've got coming up with particular relevance, one of them with particular relevance to Wales. We've just received funding from BEIS, from the UK government, to work on a collaborative project along with the University of West of England Combined Authority, the Information Commissioner's Office, and here in Wales we're working with Swansea University Innovation Hub, and also Swansea University Law Clinic. And that's on a project to actually look at how technology can help address some of the barriers for people accessing legal advice, particularly focusing on advice services. So it's very much looking at access to justice and how technology can help help people access to justice. So we're going to be working with advice agencies here in Wales to hear from them directly how they think technology can help people better access their services and also legal advice. It's a project that we're working on over the next 6 months. And obviously, we'll update you as we have more information. The aim of that is to come up with some very specific problems that we can actually develop and design some new technology around, and then test that through proof of concept approaches. And we'll also be doing the same in the West of England as well. The second project I wanted to talk to you about very briefly was our unbundling pilot, which we're just about to start. We're, at the moment, encouraging people, if it's something that you're interested in, you're already doing some work in this area, then do get in touch with us, because we're looking for firms to come on board with us as part of the pilot. And the aim is really to think about how services could potentially be unbundled in the future. So some of the services that solicitors and law firms might be running at the moment, where there could be aspects that clients and consumers could actually do themselves. So in conveyancing, for instance, there might be elements that consumers can do themselves, so do part of the service themselves, and then solicitors do other elements as well. And we know that some firms are already doing this, and there are also challenges and opportunities. There may be opportunities to enable more people to have access to legal services through this route to potentially reduce costs. But there are also challenges in terms of solicitors making sure that the services and the things that people are doing are actually signed off effectively, and challenges around insurance as well. So if you're already doing work in this area and want to work with us or tell us what you're doing, then, obviously get in touch with us. But if you're interested in exploring the journey with us, then again, keep abreast of what we're doing in that area. And then the final thing to say is that we're also doing another piece of work with Swansea University to develop a virtual innovation hub, and we're working in partnership with them, the Law Society, and the Legal Services Consumer Panel. And the aim of that is to look at working collaboratively with universities across the UK to look at technology solutions for complex legal problems. And again, that's something that we'll be providing more information about shortly. The final thing that I need to do is to tell you a little bit about the tech, so the translation facilities that you have on your chairs. So I don't know about you, but I haven't used one of these for a long time. But those of you who are in Wales may remember using these, or if you haven't before, I'm going to just very briefly explain how we're using them today. So these are if you wish to contribute through the Medium of Welsh, and we'd very much encourage you to do so if you'd like to. You need to hold the headsets like this, so the black section there needs to be facing away from you. So they need to be facing away from you, and we need you to keep them switched off until someone's speaking. So if you want to contribute through the Medium of Welsh, either as a speaker or in the Q&A session, then if you could just, when you raise your hand for a question and the microphone comes to you, just let us know that you want to contribute through the Medium of Welsh. And then we can all switch our headsets on with the little switch at the bottom there. And then you can make your contribution. And then when someone's finished speaking, just make sure that you switch the headsets off afterwards. If you have a problem with your headset at all, there's some spare batteries at the back, but they should all be working because they've all been tested. The other thing to say is that they've been sanitised and they've been quarantined. So at the end, if you could also leave the headsets on your chair before you leave. So thanks very much for your time, and I look forward to speaking to more of you later.
Thank you, Liz. So let's get ready to move on to the panel session. I suppose the final thing I wanted to say before we do that is this will be a far more interesting panel discussion if we get interaction from you. So I will be coming out to you to ask questions for the panellists. So I encourage you to get your thinking hats on. And what we hope to get out of this session is we might get some big picture ideas around sort of the future of innovation in legal services, but we also want to try and focus on what are some practical tips in the here and now that you might be able to take away and go back to your business and have a think about. So if I could invite the panellists to come and sit on the stage, that would be great, thank you. And I will introduce them if... So first up next to me, I've got Steph Locke, who is an author who then set up Nightingale HQ. They look at how businesses can use data and adopt artificial intelligence. And actually, Steph is one of only 4 people in the world, I understand, to hold awards from Microsoft given for both her knowledge of data and artificial intelligence. We couldn't get the other 3 people to turn up, so I'm pleased we've got you. Then next to Steph, we've got Chris Knott, who is founder of Capital Law, as well as director of Capital people. He's been a lawyer for almost 40 years now. He's a real champion of business in Wales. There's too many sort of posts and roles he's had to name, but he's received an OBE for his services there. And also, I understand, Chris, you've got to run off quickly after this event because you're launching a new office in Paris. So obviously it's an exciting time for capital law. So thank you for joining us, Chris. Then next to him, we've got Clive Thomas, who's Managing Director of Watkins and Gunn Solicitors in South Wales. He's been a solicitor for 3 decades now. He leads the personal injury team at the firm, and he also chairs the Cardiff and District Law Tech Group. And then finally at the end, we've got Adam Weiner, who's an Associate Professor of Law and Computer Sciences at Swansea University. Like Steph, he's also an expert on artificial intelligence, but has a real focus on law. And he, excuse me, if Steph's one of four, he's what sets him apart is I think you've got 2 PhDs, so you're a doctor and a doctor, or doctor, and that's on linguistics and also computer science. So it's really good to have our panellists here. Now I've got a few initial questions I'm going to ask our panellists, and then I'll be coming to you. But I've got an initial question for all of you, which is, I suppose, what does innovation in the legal sector mean to you? And perhaps I'll go for the entirely original route of going along the panel. So, Steph, do you want to kick us off?
So, obviously, I'm not a lawyer. Start that with a proper definition there. But innovation in law has its own unique challenges compared to many businesses. But you can also think of yourselves in sort of an abstract way. So you are a professional services function. So you can look at innovation across accounting, consulting, strategy, and business management to look at how they are also tackling many of the knowledge worker, time-constrained situations that you face inside your firms. But you can also then actually abstract a little bit further and even look at organizations in things like manufacturing. After all, you produce outputs, you have outcomes, you have a whole process involving skilled workers with different specialisms. You have to hand off to be able to assemble things. So you can actually look outside of law to see what people are doing that helps their fields to bring it back in. Because ultimately, innovation is liberally stealing other people's common practices. So we can see things like how are consultancies and accountants dealing with the blend of skilled resources that they need. How are people in financial services dealing with their compliance burden whilst moving into the cloud, adopting software as a service, and really kind of think about what lessons they're learning and they're publishing and how you can more easily adopt those into your area, into your business, so that you don't have to do quite so much hard work. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. People are already learning lessons, and as well as solving the unique challenges to law, we can be adopting things more seamlessly with a much lower R&D investment.
Well, thank you, Steph. I didn't think we would open up with the encouragement to steal as an opening statement, but I'm sure as lawyers we can find a different word.
Yeah. Hey,
yeah.
If it's not patented, it's all good.
Yeah. Imitation. Or Chris, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, firstly, I wondered whether Liz was being a little ironic when she opened and said that there were normally dinosaurs on this stage, and then she invites me and Clive.
Hang on, how did I get into
I was just neutralising the pain. Well, firstly, I agree that innovation isn't just about tech. In fact, tech is a bit of innovation. Firstly, you have to have the basics in your business right before you can innovate, and if we get time later on, I might talk about what they are. But I would suggest that everyone has a look on, there's a very good TED talk called Exploitation versus Exploration. If you just Google that, you'll get the TED talk. And I can summarize it this, which is that exploitation is just doing what you do, making your money, and if you're like Kodak, you die. And exploration is all the tech businesses that we see around who are exploring, trying to create, and most of them fall over because they don't have a revenue stream. And you have to be somewhere in here. And the clever bit is getting this right. It's point one. Point two, there are three types of people. There are those who can innovate or spot innovation. There are those that can't. And there are those that think that they can, but can't. And most lawyers, sadly, are in the latter two categories. And don't worry about it and get over it, because everything in the main that encourages us to go into this profession, and then all the things that we're trained to do, manage down risk, spot problems, are all designed to steer us away naturally from being innovators. So get over it. But you do need to have a core of innovation. So what I'd encourage you to do is to find the person in your organisation best placed to do this and try and get them to mop up the brain cells of everybody else. Because my third point is that people think that innovation is about either having good ideas or stealing good ideas. That's just the easy bit. When I stopped being managing partner, because I love all this sort of stuff, and my partner Alan took over being managing partner, she said it was a complete pain in the arse, because everybody in the business thought that the way of appealing to me was to be innovating all the time. She said there was bloody ideas everywhere. Everyone thought that the way of getting a promotion was to have 5 ideas. And she had to calm all that down. Actually, it's her who found the exploitation exploration video and showed it to them, and it shut them down overnight. But the reason I say that is that real innovation is not about the idea, but it's about having an idea that's commercially viable, that you're capable of delivering, and that you can deliver. Okay? And most people can't do the latter bit. And therefore, to do the innovation of business, it needs to be focused around the person best able to do that. You have to have large doses of common sense and be able to spot what they can do. My fourth point, and I'll shut up, is that innovation is about evolution, not revolution. Of course there's revolution. Of course there's Uber. Of course there's the internet. But our balance sheets don't allow us to sponsor revolution. They allow us to sponsor evolution.
Thank you, Chris. So we've had stealing, we've had staff who are pain in the arses. What have you got, Clive?
Thanks very much. I think innovation isn't something we're traditionally known as lawyers, something that we do. But I personally really enjoy it. I think it's normally driven by functionality, a need to improve our business efficiency, a response to a change in the law or regulations, or to attract clients, or gain an edge on our competitors. Could be a new method or process, a new way for clients to access our services, or a new way to package or market the products that we sell. But I think as lawyers we can be guilty of doing things a certain way as that's the way we've always done it. Because it's safe and it doesn't breach any of the regulations from the SRA. To me, innovation can be it could be a light bulb moment, or just looking at something and thinking there must be a better way of doing that, or seeing a good idea in a different sector and thinking how can that be applied to what we do in the legal sector. So I tend to think about tech when I think about innovation, although it isn't all about tech. I'm pretty old school now. As mentioned, a dinosaur with 3 decades of qualification under my belt. I remember the old dictaphones with the tapes, and when computers were first brought into the office, our brochure when I first qualified said, we've embraced technology with word processors, facsimiles, and a 24-hour answer phone. How about that? Cutting-edge technology. And I gave a talk about what Chris was saying just now. I gave a talk at Legal Wales a couple of years ago where I said legal tech has been all about evolution rather than revolution. And there was unlikely to be any sudden Richard Susskind-style death of lawyers' advances anytime soon. But I'm clearly not Nostradamus, because I was proved wrong pretty dramatically then with all the advances we then saw with the pandemic. And the pandemic, of course, has fast-forwarded developments in innovation and legal tech across the profession. So giving examples within my firm of how we've innovated, we had to scramble, like I'm sure many of you, when lockdown was first announced, internally, so that we could work remotely, and externally, so that we could deal with clients and third parties generally. We weren't ready for it at all. We'd parked a lot of initiatives as simply being too difficult or too time-consuming. But necessity is the mother of invention. And I think we all probably advanced about 3 years and 3 months. But inevitably, this produced a lot of sticking plaster solutions. So the challenge then for us is to replace those sticking plaster solutions with resilient, future-proof solutions, and to get the firm ready to compete now in this new contact-free environment, which we've set about doing. And I think one of the most positive influences of the pandemic was to create a new appetite for innovation and a much more receptive environment then for that innovation that's been created. So Chris's 5 ideas will now be really welcomed, I imagine. We wanted to harness that new appetite for innovation, so we brought in a consultant and we developed a service pledge for the firm, because we think as a whole getting those service levels right is the bedrock of any innovations. Split them into teams, one team collaborating with an IT designer to develop an internal app, another working with an IT consultant to look at possible case management software and make better use of what we've got. A lot of us aren't really making the best of some of the tech we've already got within our firms. And we also developed videos on the website with a triage, allowing clients to book online Zoom appointments. So looking at this contact-free environment, and also looked at a specific public law website. But we've still got loads to do, and I'm keen that we continue to foster that innovation within our firms and don't go back to normality as we go back to our old habits as we go back to normality within our firms. But one of the points I wanted to make is it's not just partners and directors who can have good ideas. Very often someone new to the firm can have a great idea but have no opportunity to share them, because before long they become indoctrinated into the this is the way we do things around here approach, and they lose that edge and that fresh perspective that they had. But I think overall, as a legal profession, we clearly need to innovate to survive and to thrive in the new economy, but we do need regulators able to nurture and facilitate that growth and development of our profession, whilst of course ensuring those high standards and protection of the public.
Thank you, Clive, and I'd like to call out at the end to regulators to make sure we support you, and hopefully we're doing a bit of that here today. So what about you, Adam?
So thank you very much for the invitation to participate in this. I'm very pleased to sit next to Clive, who I've known for several years now, and we had some collaboration with some teaching material at Swansea. I think I'll take a slightly different tack from my colleagues, perhaps closer to what Steph has as a view. But the question to me was, what does innovation in the legal sector mean to me? So I will sort of make it a bit more personal, but then I hope to build it out to how this would be relevant to you. Basically, it's applying scientific thinking to legal information and legal processes. That's what I do, right? I've done research in AI and law for some 20 years now, so to a great extent, the things that you do, the information that you have, is the object of my investigation. I know it's maybe not comfortable to think of it that way, but that's one way to approach it. And then I collaborate with people who are the experts, the holders of the information. It's not my role to tell somebody like Clive what to think or how to think, but curiosity, how do you think? How does that work? What is that process? What information do you have? And from that, we have some kind of analysis. This perspective that I have and the way that I work is really derived from, as you mentioned, my background in linguistics. So I want to connect some points about this. Languages, we all know some language. Some of us know two. Some are two very different languages, English and Welsh. Romance languages, Chinese languages, etc. What linguists do is they regard language as an object itself of study, right? So over the diversity of languages, different sounds, different sentence structures, different words, what linguists see is commonality, uniformity, the so-called deep structure. We used to talk about this all the time. We hardly ever talk about it. Now we talk about machine learning. It's a big conflict of interest there. I'm one of those deep structure type of people, looking at the diversity and trying to puzzle out where's the homogeneity, what are the similarities, what's the structure of the system underlying that diversity, all that surface variation. And that very much comes into play in the kind of work that I do in the law, because there are various practices, there's all sorts of legal areas, there's all sorts of legal services. There's a great interest in providing legal services across these kinds of areas. My curiosity is to say, what brings these things together, and how can these different services and different legal areas be somehow related? What is some kind of structure? What, for instance, is the ecology? What are the common ideas? What's the common information that's processed? And how, then, to make it practical, can this be applied to your practice, right? So just give you an instance of this. I was very interested in legal aid and providing legal services. So we developed one prototype tool to help give some debt advice, basically a legal triage, a debt triage tool, gather some basic information, give some suggestions about how to address that particular debt situation, and then provide the client with some information that they could take to a legal advisor, not replacing advisors, supporting their activity. But this is only one slice of a much greater activity, right? Because debt connects to housing, connects to health, connects to family, and there have to be communications, common understandings between those various kinds of systems. So we can't just sort of atomize, right, different legal services. We actually have to figure out what's that underlying structure, the underlying communication that has to happen between those different components of the legal system so that they can effectively cooperate. And that's going to happen across the legal system, from what the government does in terms of issuing legislation, piping that all the way through to the diverse legal services that are provided. So I look at this as one ecology, one kind of overall system, and it's a lot of work to figure out what are the parts, what's the information, which is why I rely on my colleagues in the legal profession to talk with me and to share their knowledge and information so that we can evolve towards that understanding.
Thank you. So I've got just a few follow-up questions, and it's really interesting to hear all those sort of opening statements. So we're going to try and run through a few questions, and then we're going to come out to you. So, Clive, you mentioned sort of hopefully the death of the lawyer isn't happening, otherwise this will be a very morose occasion.
Yes.
But what do you think the legal sector does look like in the next decade, sort of looking into your crystal ball?
Well, I think there's always going to be a place for bespoke legal advice from a talented lawyer who's able to problem solve for their clients. What I anticipate will change is the infrastructure and support mechanism be hugely improved through the use of tech.
The 24-hour answer phone machine.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
that's it,
yeah.
exactly. Cutting edge.
Yeah.
Developments like that. Yes. Yeah.
What about you, Chris? Where do you think the legal sector is going to be in a decade's time? What's it look like?
Well, I can talk about the commercial legal sector. I worry like hell about the law provided to people across, people law, if I call it that.
Yeah.
From consumer law, it's a bad phrase. Because if anything needs innovation in it to provide a cost-effective solution, it's that, but I have no idea how that's going to happen. But in the commercial legal sector, I think the sector will thrive. I think it's in the early stages of adapting to it. I was interested to look, if you look at the FT Innovation Awards, they name the 10 people who are, in their view, the biggest innovators in the UK. And they're all effectively working on things that enable us to do our jobs better. None of them are working on things that do our job for us. And I agree, I'm not with Richard Susskind either, who will say we will be dead in 10 years' time. I can't see AI replacing the need for us, but I do see it massively enhancing what we do. And I see, I think that the dinosaurs like me, sorry Clive, need to have an eye on the fact that the people that I now hire are massively tech savvy. This is normal to them. They grew up being able to access all of this and do it completely amazing. In 10 years' time, they'll be running the show here, and they'll be writing code. When I started, there was a typing pool. There would be a coding pool in law firms. At the moment, I say, do not go into tech development. Might as well open a chip shop. It's not what we do. Some of the massive firms with balance sheets can do that. We can't. That will change. In 10 years' time, we will have coding departments.
So we've heard the lawyer's not dying, AI is not going to take over. As someone, your business, it would be quite good, wouldn't it, if AI took over?
Not at all. One, we all have that worry about Skynet, but I actually see AI and code and all the things we can do with technology more about augmenting what we do in any profession and really scaling what we can do. You know, we've had this increase year on year in staff productivity. How can we do more with the same amount of skill? And that is really where all the, to the point of kind of radical transformation versus continuous improvement, you can think big thoughts and kind of try and turn your business upside down, change radically the way it works. But actually, you've got tons of amazing staff who know their field inside and out. And technology can help you retain those people, help them grow your business, increase your revenue, reduce your overheads, and just continue keeping up with the times. You know, things like the parking ticket objector. Who wants to spend their day objecting to parking tickets for their for their clients, right? That's nobody's idea of fun. You probably have the cheapest people
Put up
in
your
your firm
hand if
doing
that is
it.
your idea of fun, challenging parking tickets, just in case.
Right, you put your cheapest staff on it. But you could be putting those cheapest staff on building your next tier up of business. But by building that chatbot, by using that technology, you've helped increase that access to justice. You've helped people solve a problem, but you're keeping your staff doing the valuable things, working out the process to object, to set the legal basis, and qualify clients at scale. So augment rather than automate away.
Adam, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So I agree entirely with Steph's view that it's all about augmentation, and I would add to that collaboration. So I teach a course, a master's course at Swansea called Computational Thinking to master's law school students. The point is not to make people coders, not to make them the system analysts, but to give them some sense about what coding is to some extent, a little bit of a sense about how you do some analysis, to give them a critical capacity about what artificial intelligence is so that they're not just, oh, sure, machine learning, it's going to take over. Nobody needs to be that way. Give you a critical capacity. See the diversity of AI and computer science, because in fact, it's extremely complicated and very diverse. There's lots of sub-areas. And to give people a language to collaborate in a team. Some people will be just the computer programmers. Some of them will just be the legal experts. Some of them will be those in-between people, etc. And they will form a team in building some system that serves some particular purpose. So there's going to be, in this system of teamwork and development, space for various people. Your expertise about the law is absolutely fundamental, but knowing how to speak to some extent to the technologists, to the computer scientists, is going to be helpful in getting your message across.
And presumably, Clive, and I was going to come to you on this point, is the law, there's a big sort of personal human touch to many areas of the law. People are often dealing with traumatic events, whether it's personal injury or family law situations. So how important is that human context and give, you know, the understanding and that face-to-face dialogue? Is that always going to be needed, and how can you do that well?
Oh, I'm of the view that that always will be needed in particular types of law. Obviously, the sub-law that's very transactional, where you simply wouldn't need that, but in other areas you certainly would. If imagine having a serious personal injury, you need to rebuild your shattered life, or there's been a bereavement, or those sorts of things, or a divorce. I mean, these are areas where you really need to get under the bonnet with somebody who they don't know what they don't know. They need to have that conversation to be comfortable with an expert lawyer who can help them to problem solve those issues. But I wanted to jump on Adam's point, if you didn't mind, in relation to this issue about one of my hobby horses in relation to lawyers being able to talk to coders, for example, and that team idea. I think it's a great idea, but I think that's where the knowledge gap is at the moment. It simply isn't there within the profession. I think people tend to assume that perhaps younger lawyers, because they've grown up with technology, will understand law tech automatically, that somehow it'll, like by osmosis, they understand it. They don't. So it's not part of any of the training that they get to date. It's not part of the SQE. It's not part of the competencies of lawyers. I know it's. I did read the plan, the SRA planets in there, isn't it, as one of the objectives for the future. But I really think that's something that needs to be fast-forwarded, because otherwise Adam's collaborative idea, which I think is really good, is never really going to happen. I've spent some time talking to Adam about different projects, and you can see kind of the disconnect in our language when we try and email each other about things.
But that's the pleasure of the task. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know why people think that's the thing to avoid. It's the pleasure, actually, of understanding and saying, you mean this, and I mean that, and then you converge on some common understanding, and then you're speaking the same language. That is actually a pleasure, and the stress of the difference initially has to be overcome. It's a sociological phenomenon. It's not a practice problem or a theoretical problem. I'm sorry to jump in. But.
No, that's fine. I'm hoping that that's something that we can see happen with what's going on in Swansea with the Innovation Lab, and collaboration opportunities there for lawyers to get involved, work with coders, and start the process.
Yeah, and it's really interesting on something like the SQE. It's interesting because if we try to bake in what lawyers need to know in terms of technology today, and by its nature an exam is going to need to last for, you can't change it every year, the risk is, will what you teach today be right for, tomorrow? Because if we
more the fundamental building blocks of it, not,
Yes.
not
It's the
understanding how you
principles.
would do
Yeah.
it. Yes,
That's right.
How you go about an idea and how you would then translate it across to a coder.
That's right. It's the principles and the concepts. We teach exactly the same thing in computer science. We don't need to teach them this programming language or that programming language. We teach them the concepts of what a programming language is. That lasts basically forever, more or less, right? The language may pass, but the concept will stay. So.
And Chris, you had a point to make, I think.
It's sort of passing away, but you asked Clive about sort of the personal touch, and people wanted to deal with people. I think the point about humans versus technology goes a bit beyond that, and it's about judgment and negotiation. And it's the judgment of a really experienced lawyer that I think is the thing that ultimately is really paid for, and that's the thing that drives rate. I can give take a normal. I was give a sort of example. Today I'm involved in a property transaction where a pre-exchange issue has arisen, where two process-driven lawyers, because they're used to churning the conveyancing wheel, have gone, you can't do it. Whereas an experienced lawyer with judgment can spot a carve-around like that. And it's that bit that I think is going to take some time before not only technology could do, but that people are happy with technology doing.
And humans need, because there's often two sides to a legal issue, the humans on one side need to understand the humans on the other side.
That was my point about negotiation, which is not only do you have to do the carve-around, but persuade the other human being to accept the carve-around.
Yeah. I'm going to push out to the audience. Are there any initial questions from anyone in the audience for our panel? And yes, brilliant. And we've got one at the back and then we've got one at the front. I'm going to say now that we did this event in Liverpool last week and Liverpool was slower than you. So there's some healthy competition. Well, it's 1-0 to Cardiff over Liverpool. So yeah thank you.
Can you hear me okay? It was just quite similar to our interest. And so I'm quite new to the industry, and something I've seen quite similar to Steph's point actually is sort of the legal industry looks at others in the professional services industry for perhaps inspiration with tech. So I guess my question is, how can we change that and make other industries look at legal as the one that's pushing forward, I guess?
So do you agree that the legal sector is perhaps behind some other sectors?
I do, yeah.
When
I think it's behind, so how can we make the legal industry forward?
Okay, good question. Anyone want to kick off on that one? Steph?
Yeah. I think it was a great point about lawyers are trained to minimize risk. And we see this in fields like accounting and stuff as well. But ultimately, risk is always there. Risk is something to be managed. Sometimes you have to accept a certain amount of risk in your business, otherwise there's no option for profit. No risk, no reward. And one of the things that we always need to balance, both from the technology side and from the domain expertise side, is how do we change the perspective on the risk of adopting technology? Where do we see it as something that is low risk with okay reward that we can implement to give us the learnings to be able to minimize the risk of adoption in a more significant area? And how can we approach this over time as individuals and as an organization where we adjust the risk equation to be improving things? And we see it with like the financial services regulators. When I was building machine learning models in financial services, they were so scared of machine learning that we were only allowed to use very basic techniques because the regulator didn't understand it, and as a result considered it too high risk to be able to do anything advanced. And this is the kind of ongoing relationship with risk and technology advancement that you have to be thinking about. How do we change the equation? How do we change it internally and at the organization level so that you can try more things and adapt and evolve?
Adam?
Yeah, so well put, Steph. I agree with this. And maybe a slightly different shift on the topic is it's worthwhile to explore how other areas are adopting technology, why, and looking into basic aspects of why it's easier for them. So accounting as another service, insurance as another service, they're also fairly slow to adopt, but they are. They are also very, very risk averse. I mean, they deal with risk. Insurance particularly deals with risk. But the insurance industry, for example, does a lot of mathematics, a lot of modeling. These concepts are built into their structure of the organizations, right, and the ways that they have of thinking, as well as in the accounting industry, right? And they've also long had computing systems to support their basic activities. So when you look at and do cross comparisons between these kinds of organizations, you can see the infrastructure there that helps them progress faster. Law does not have this, right? And that's part of what's going into this friction in development. Whether that will change, well, that's another matter. But it does suggest that there has to be some kind of change to enable developments. So, for example, not just a reflection on risk, I completely agree with you, but an openness to either it's maths, formalization, certain kinds of analysis, things that these other industries are doing. Financial services are also very open to what is maths to us, what's formalization, these kinds of things. So does that mean a sea change in legal thinking? I don't know, but it's partly an explanation for where is the friction. And it's there for a very, very good reason, right? It's not something bad, but it's worth reflecting on that and then positioning yourself accordingly.
I mean, accountancy is a really interesting one. One, actually, data shows that a small business is more likely to go to their accountant when they have a legal problem than they are a lawyer, which raises a question. But that's often because they have an ongoing relationship with their accountant, so it's almost, oh, that's the first person I'll go to. But I've sat in groups with small businesses, and actually accountancy's had a massive change in the last 10, 15 years because everyone would have an accountant, but things like QuickBooks and tech has actually meant that a lot of small businesses now do their accounts themselves using tech enabled them to do some of the more tricky stuff, and then they go to their accountant for the sort of end bit. So you've got the unbundling element of it, and you've also got the using an accountant for the really expert bit. So it's interesting. I definitely think accountancy is different to law, but it's in a different place. Chris, did you have something to add on this?
Yeah, on your question, I think that you won't get real drive in this profession until you get collaboration between the law firms. If you take accountancy, there are 4 massive firms that dominate the marketplace with enormous balance sheets, and they can innovate, and they're competing with us furiously. The insurance sector, absolutely enormous companies who are driving innovation. Yeah. The largest law firm in the UK is a fly on the side of those elephants. If you look at the people in the FT Innovation Awards I mentioned earlier, there's 10 of them. They're all effectively doing the same thing. So all of these firms have got bunches of people who are all trying to invent the latest form of e-discovery or document analysis, or they're all trying to do the same thing. And do they really think that they're going to be the first one to produce something that gives this massive market advantage that means that all the others disappear? Well, of course not. The example in banking was when blockchain first arose about, I don't know, 10 years ago when the cryptocurrencies came out, all the banks thought, oh, damn, we might not exist if the blockchain takes off. And they all put teams of people into trying to be the first one to win the blockchain battle on the basis they'd be the survivor. And then they suddenly realized they were all doing exactly the same thing, and they were completely wasting their time, and they all scaled their teams down and started collaborating, and it all took a different pace. So I think that's when that's going, because the tech innovation within the law firms is really happening in the bigger firms. At our scale, and I'm assuming that the firms here are all around the sort of size of our firm, we're about, I don't know, 200. As I said earlier, you have to scan and you have to look for really good external innovators who are doing things that really can add to your business on an incremental basis, and hope that in that and in the relationships you find a winner.
Adam, I think you had a quick point to come in on that.
Quickly, so Chris, you know, the point there is this about collaboration is finding the things that are in common and building things together. One of the other very significant differences between law and these other services is data. They have data. They work together in data, accounting, insurance, financial services, etc. They always work with data. Legal data is of a different character altogether, and it's very difficult to access, even more difficult to collaborate over. This is a very significant barrier in the research and development community like mine, but also I think in the community to develop applications. If you don't have data and if you can't collaborate over data, then you're stuck. Okay. So this is something rather fundamental to the environment that probably needs to be addressed. Thank you.
Yeah. Clive, did you have anything to add on that? And then we're going to come to this woman at the front who had a question.
Yeah, sure. I think, taking Chris's point, yeah, it's difficult to look at the legal sector as a whole. You've got to really break it down to the big law and the people law, as we were talking about. And there's quite a lot of firms that are in that sort of 5 to 50 category. That's smaller again than Chris was talking about. And, but I think there is that appetite to improve and to catch up. But we're facing issues around, in Wales at least, connectivity, the old case management software being paper heavy, needing to get new hardware, and cybersecurity issues. So these are all areas where we'd be looking for support from Welsh Gov, perhaps, and also nurturing for the regulator. I throw it out again.
All right, yeah. Well, thank you. So should we go to this woman here? I think you had a question, yeah?
Oh, this is strange. Is that working?
It is working,
oh,
yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, Chris, you mentioned that before we can start innovating, we need to have the basics in place. I just wanted to ask, what are those basics? Because I fear that some of us in the legal sector may still not have those basics in place.
Okay. I think there are five things. The first is, there are 5 basic things to run a law firm. The first is, what's the point of your firm? And if you say the point of it is to make money, wrong. You might think that, but no one else in your business thinks that making you money is the point of the business. What's the point of the business? So, I want to be the best we're the best family law firm in Riverside. That's a good point. But what is the point of the business? Secondly, what's the values of the business? And you don't tell people what they are, you ask everybody else what they are. And once you've worked out what they are, you have to live by them. Have to. It took us 10 years ago, 3 months to get over that one, but we haven't changed them in that time. Thirdly, people. Why would the people that you need to run your business want to work for you? And you'll all know that the people market post-COVID has radically changed in the UK because the magic circle firms have worked out they can target all the clever people in the regions, pay them regional rates and charge them that money. So if we're under attack. If we're under attack, I'm attacking the other people, and other people are attacking everything. The whole legal market's changed. So the question is, why would those people want to work with you, and what are you going to do to persuade them to come and work with you? The fourth thing is, what is your product? So that's very simple. What's the service you deliver, and what's the price you deliver it at? It's only 2 things. And the service is simply what you do and how you do it. And you have to concentrate on the how you do it. How you do it, how you do it, how you do it. Because that's the thing. I don't do anything revolutionary. Every single thing that I do, hundreds of law firms do that. What differentiates how you do it. And the 5th thing is tech. You have to because we are tech-enabled businesses. And to me, there are 2 rules. One is you have to have the best practice management system you can afford. And the moment you've bought it, you then have to start saving up for the next one. And the second is be in the cloud.
Did you want to come back on any of that? No? That means it was all perfectly. Thank you for the question. I suppose, have we got any other questions in the audience? Yep, we've got a woman at the back there. Thank you.
Given the large number of law firms, I can't see that innovation is ever going to be driven like it was in the accountancy world, because there are, as you say, too many firms that are of the 0 to 50 number. Isn't this change then going to have to be driven by the regulators, data sharing and some kind of consistency as to approach, particularly with things like conveyancing?
And I don't know whether that's a question for me or whether it's a question for the panel. Does anyone have a view as to if we need to bring data together, we need to bring collaborative working, who should be driving that? Adam, who do you think?
It could be driven from the bottom up, right? Firms and lawyers could say, this is what we need to do together, and they could sit down for tea and come to some agreement about how they'll do these kinds of things. That has not happened. There are social and institutional reasons why it's unlikely for that to happen. And whether it's the regulator who drives it, the regulator can only say, give advisory direction, right? The government, in the way it serves legislation, can, give more disciplined guidance, right? You will all adopt the following, but probably it's going to be driven to some extent by, here's our advice. People get together to do that, and then the bottom-up firms, individuals get together and say, we will follow that kind of guidance and see where we end up. Maybe we'll lose, maybe we'll win, and then there'll be some evolution of the ecology to see who are the winners, given what the guidance is about. So, but I think the regulator plays absolutely an essential role in giving attention to certain kinds of areas.
Chris?
I agree with Adam.
Yeah,
I absolutely agree with that. I think it will come from the bottom up. I think it will come. We all live in this, people in our profession live in this mistaken belief that we do compete with one another, but the barriers we put around our businesses are really thick and really hard, and they don't need to be. There are loads of ways in which just collaboration is completely essential. I've got an open email to anyone in the profession who wants to have a cup of coffee or chat about anything. Some of the best, I won't name a name, but the senior partner of one of my competitors and I got chatting a couple of years back, and we make a point of having a beer once every 3 months. It's probably one of the best 2 hours I spend, and the more we can do. And I've got some really good ideas of things that we could achieve if we collaborated, one of which is killing the directories.
Right. Well, I'm pleased that if nothing else, this panel has facilitated an invite for either a coffee or a beer with Chris, but let's see whether the other panels step up to that. But Clive, perhaps I could come to you, because perhaps some people will be sitting here hearing this conversation thinking, wow, there's such huge issues there. I'm just a small practice, maybe I'm a sole practitioner, I don't know where to start. And a lot of question that I know that particularly smaller firms ask is, I know that technology might benefit my business, but I really don't know where to go or where to go for the expertise. You've said you've used sort of IT services before and used tech. How do you have you got any tips for anyone on how you're approaching that?
No, I think it's a real potential minefield. It's, as a dinosaur, I always say you don't want to be the one to go and buy a Betamax video and waste your money on IT and find that you bought something that doesn't have any sort of longevity. It's a complete waste of time. So it's great if there's some sort of support for that. Which, can I bring in our Law Tech Committee at this stage?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's obviously a great opportunity for people to get involved and to join in the Cardiff District Law Tech Committee. But we'll welcome anybody in Wales actually to join us. It's gone exceptionally well, and what it's been is it's very new. We've only been going just the end of last year, so we set it up for those reasons really, to see whether there was an appetite to get involved in it. And people did. Lots of different firms involved with us, all different sizes, different experience in terms of IT. We've also, Richard from Law Study Wales got involved, obviously Emma Waddingham at Legal News, and Swansea Uni have got involved too. And we've been in touch with Welsh Gov. So it's gone extremely well to date. What we found is there's so many similar issues around that we could share and talk about and share good practice that it's become a really useful thing. But the thing we determined was that in order to know where we were and to be of any help, we had to get out there a baseline survey. So we put it out there. I'll refer to my note on this. So hopefully you've all seen it out there, the survey that we put out, there's Pan Wales. So it's a trilogy of surveys, there's going to be 3 of them. The first one's out there is the Where Are We Now? So it's what technology do firms currently use, how do they use it, where and when, and what are the current limitations. And that's been out for a little while now, isn't it? We've had about 50 firms take part, but we'd like more. It's still available. It's still online, isn't it? You can see it through Legal News. Or where's best to see it, Emma, to get on there? Where's best for them to find it? So Emma's got the QR code with her if anyone wants to get involved with that.
Sorry, thank you. It's legalnewswales.com, and I've got a QR code that you can zap, and it takes you to the link if you're interested later. Thank you.
And we're about to launch the next bit, which is where do we want to be? So what problems do you want to overcome within your business? And then we're going to move to how do we get there. So at the end of all this, hopefully we'll have some really good data and information around the baseline of where we are as law firms, and then we can talk to Welsh Gov and talk to others about what we're going to do about it and how we can help firms in the way we've just talked about.
Brilliant. Steph, I think you've got a point, and then Adam, and we've just got about 10 minutes left, or actually 5 minutes left. So if you keep your answers fairly short, and we'll see if we can squeeze in a couple more questions.
So to the point about how do small businesses solve some of these bigger challenges, I would be thoroughly ruthless about reducing your non-billable rates. So getting as much of your time as productive as possible. Things like doing the online booking through systems like Calendly that you can pay $10 a month for. Get your case management, your customer relationship management systems in place. Don't do everything through your inbox. Focus on these fundamentals that help you improve your process, avoid missing missing out correspondence, improve your quality, improve your billable rates. You can buy these things off the shelf, they plug and play with each other, or they give you things you can copy and paste into your websites that just automatically integrate with your Outlook and things like that. You don't have to solve the big questions as a small business. You can just be a much more resilient, leaner business.
Thank you, Steph. Adam?
So let me flip over another perspective, because there's a great consistent appeal to how can we reach out to tech, or how can we reach out to expertise to find the things that we need or the help that we need. The other perspective is, I know how this will sound, but to look within, really, because you all have the knowledge about the law, about the process, about the structure, about the information. What you need, to a great extent, is a methodology to examine what you know, to take it apart, to do, in effect, computational thinking about what you know and what you know how to do. And you can yourself start to take apart a problem in such a way that then you could start to think about, well, could there be a tool, an implementation for this, or how could I join together? The analogy is with what linguists do to do linguistic analysis. They don't always do surveys of lots of language. They can do that. They don't always go out to the community and say, oh, tell me how you say this in Welsh. They oftentimes sit and think through language structures themselves, using a methodology to arrive at insightful analyses. There's a lot of knowledge that you hold that you can empower yourself, and then you can take out to other people.
Okay, thank you, Adam. I think we've got time for one more question. Yes, question for the front here, and this will be our last question, so it's going to be a brilliant question.
It's not a question so much, but it's an observation. Richard Jones from the Law Society.
Hi there.
One of the barriers that we are finding in Wales is that firms in rural Wales is getting them to adopt and invest in IT. Some of these firms, the demography is an older senior partners. When they spent 20 years ago, when they set up the firm, IT was so expensive that they maybe come to retirement and thinking, we don't want to invest that money now, because they don't realise that it's not as expensive as it was. And the other issue is, are they getting value for money? And are they getting equipment that is going to be fit for purpose and meet their needs? Just 2 very quick examples. One large software company that does conveyancing software, it's quite expensive, it's a very good system apparently, offers a free system to smaller firms because it interacts with the bigger firm. But the firms won't take it up because... And then there's another example. Someone went on a course with Welsh Government, with Business Wales, and the lady in the front, she went white. She walked out. She came back after 45 minutes, and they said, "Are you okay?" She said, "I am now. We were about to sign a contract for £80,000 for a server with 5 years' worth of support that you've just told me I can get for £10 a month."
Wow.
So I think that's the message that we've got to get out, is that investing in the right IT is not expensive. And I think that's about also, where do people go, who do they trust?
So there's a really good Welsh Gov funded organisation called, I think, Superfast Wales, and they do a lot of kind of the digital fundamentals in rural areas in particular. Yeah. And definitely I never recommend to any of my customers in any way, shape or form that you do capital expenditure on IT hardware. Move to the cloud, software as a service, at worst, platform as a service where you can host your databases and stuff, and let people like Microsoft, who are the experts in information security and compliance and all of the things around tech, offload the risk to them and just pay for what you use. It means you can try something, if it doesn't work, you can take it down, and you've only paid for a month or two.
That is really useful. There's, I think part of a question that was in there, and I wanted to come to Chris and Clive on this, is the partnership model a problem for innovation?
Yes.
Yes. So why?
Because innovation requires business decisions and investments, and the partnership model is not a great way in which to run a business. If you look at the way, take any of the firms that have gone through a public flotation, take Knights, for example. The only lawyer on the business side of Knights, running Knights, who are doing a terrific consolidation job, is David, the chief executive, who gave up the law when he was 35 and went to private equity. They're all people who know how to run a business. They leave the lawyers to lawyer and get paid very well for the lawyering, and they put the people who know how to run a business on the side running the business, and they get very well paid to run the business. And lawyers have got to get used to that. They've got to get used to, I'm either going to be a lawyer or I'm going to be in business. And if you are, you can make a massive transition.
Clive, did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we recently incorporated, so I say, oh, terrible, that partnership model. But no, for the other 29 years, we were a partnership. But no, I think as long as you've got a sensible succession strategy, there's no reason why you couldn't, you can't innovate as a partnership in the same way as you could as an incorporated company. But I take Chris's point. The problem, I think, within a lot of the businesses is this, the lack of perhaps business knowledge and certainly tech knowledge internally. And that's going to hold a lot of firms back in the sense, unless you look at something like some sort of virtual IT director or partner that's going to support you and carry you through. Otherwise, I think you'll always be held back by this knowledge gap.
Thank you. And Adam?
Remark that the firm structure, partnership structure is one way that law is being delivered, but we also know that there's all these legal tech companies out there. Legal Geek has a catalog of different services. They are bringing lawyers in to work with them to design some technology. So they are doing an end run around these practices. It almost, to be blunt, it doesn't matter what happens with the partnership structure because legal services are going to be provided by these organizations and they are legally allowed to do so. So they will bring in lawyers to give them advice about how do we structure this service. So that's something to really pay attention to, right? Is it a threat? I don't know, but it's happening there in the environment already.
Thank you. Now we've come to the end in time, so what I'm going to ask our panellists to, almost within 1 or 2 sentences, if there is one thing you'd like the audience to take away from today, either repeating a point that you've made, or perhaps there's some killer point you wanted to make but you haven't got to make yet, perhaps if you could just have a couple of sentences to close up for people to take away, and then we'll finish. So, Steph, I've sprung this on you first. I keep them coming to you first. It's unfair, isn't it?
Set a small budget and a couple people in your team who like tech to try some new things for you. Buy those SaaS products, give them a go, put them on your website, talk to some customers, see how they feel about it. Test things out, low risk, low investment, give it a whirl, and then build on any gains and take the lessons learned and move quickly with it.
Thank you. Chris?
Steph's just said what I was going to say. So I'll put it in a different way, which is, and I'm going to repeat what Steph and Adam said earlier, which is, firstly, what are the 10 or 15 things that you think you should do to improve the service that you're delivering and the price you're delivering at? And then have a couple of people, the most tech-enabled people in your organisation, to scour the market, because the market's trying to fix these things for you. There are tech firms trying to sort these problems. To just read into it, find a geek who can be your external director, and just read into it to work out what the market can do that can help fix these problems, and then you're away.
So we need to set up a website called findageek.com then, by the sounds of it. So Clive, what about you?
Yeah, still on the geek front, I think we should all look to increase the technology within our firm and really focus on that skills gap that I think is going to hold us all back if we don't. And also, of course, complete our survey, help us help you, and go and see Emma and get the QR code.
So I would pick up on something Chris mentioned earlier, which is collaboration is really essential. Collaboration outside of your organization, and also being open to experimentation and open information. I think that those are things that are going to stand people in, a good purpose for a very long time. But it does take a different disposition than oftentimes lawyers are trained in.
Thank you. I think that's a brilliant note to end on. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. A particular thank you to our panellists, who I think, one, have provided brilliant insights, and they've also done that sort of under the interrogation of the sunlight in their faces. So thank you for that. My tip probably is to bring a cap or sunglasses to this event. But I think that was a great session. Could we put our hands together for our panel, please? We're going to have a coffee break now. You can get coffee upstairs, but I'm around, and some of our panellists are going to still be around if you want to chat to them. And then we're coming back to talk more with a consumer focus, I think, at 12:15. So I'll see you in a bit. Thank you.